All right, let's jump right in. Today we're going to unpack a really fascinating, kind of mind-bending theory about what life is at its very core. We're looking at a text that presents a completely different way of seeing what makes you, well, you. So let's just start with the huge question, one that people have been asking forever. What is the true essence of life? You know, we think of ourselves as these physical things, bodies, cells, atoms. But what if that's not the whole story? What if the real source code of our existence is somewhere else?
The text we're diving into today makes this incredibly bold claim right up front. Life is a spiritual antimatter structure. Okay, I know, that probably brings up way more questions than answers, right? Like, for starters, what in the world is an antimatter structure?
To really get our heads around this whole idea, we've got to first define the terms the way this source uses them. And I have to say, this is not the physics you might have learned in school. We're stepping into a whole different way of thinking here, one that says our inner invisible world is what literally shapes our outer reality. So first up, the word antimatter. Now just forget everything you know from science class about particles and opposite charges. In this philosophy, antimatter is just anything you can't perceive with your five senses. Simple as that. It's the whole unseen world.
So if you can't see it, or hear it, or touch it, how do you even perceive it? Well, the text says you have to use a dharma eye. Think of it as a kind of spiritual or inner vision that lets you observe this non-physical side of existence. And this is where it gets really interesting, because look how broad this definition of antimatter is. It's not just some kind of vague energy. We're talking about things like time and space, our own thoughts and consciousness, even abstract systems like the laws of the universe or the structure of a prayer.
And this comparison just lays out the core idea perfectly. On one side, you've got the material structure, the physical world we can see and measure, made of atoms and cells. The source calls this the carrier. But on the other side, you have the antimatter structure, that invisible world of thoughts, soul, and laws. And that, it says, is the true essence of life.
So how does the source actually make the case for this? Well, it takes us on this really cool conceptual journey, drilling down, down, down into the micro world to try and find the absolute foundation of our being.
Okay, so the logic goes something like this. We start big, with a human cell. It has all our information, but it's made of atoms, so that can't be it. So we look inside the atom, at the nucleus. But wait, that's made of protons and neutrons, which are made of quarks. We just keep going smaller and smaller, past particles we know into theoretical ideas like strings. And according to this text, if you could just keep going infinitely small, you'd eventually arrive at emptiness. Just zero.
And here it is, the big payoff. The source concludes that this fundamental emptiness, this 0 point, is the ultimate reality. This, the text claims, is the antimatter structure of life. So our essence isn't a thing, it's not a particle. It's this fundamental state of nothingness that everything else is built upon. Wild, right?
Okay, I know, that was super abstract. To make this idea a little more concrete, the source uses a surprisingly simple but actually really effective analogy: a fax machine. Just think for a second about how a fax works. You put in a physical piece of paper, right? But the machine doesn't send the paper, it scans it, it converts all the information into a structured electrical signal, and it sends that signal over the phone line. Then the machine on the other end gets that signal and prints out a totally new copy on a fresh piece of paper.
So here's the crucial part of that analogy. Our physical body, that's just the piece of paper. It's the temporary carrier. But our true essence, our soul or antimatter structure, is the information itself. It's the structured signal that contains the whole blueprint. The paper can get thrown away, but the information, the structure, has been transmitted.
So you might be asking, why does any of this even matter in this belief system? Well, it's not just a cool thought experiment. It's really the foundation for a path of personal and spiritual growth. It's all about working on that inner signal.
The big idea here is that everything about us on the outside, how we look, our personality, what happens in our lives, is a direct printout of our inner, invisible antimatter structure. The external is just a reflection of the internal.
And the source draws a very, very direct line here. It claims that a person who is excellent has a relatively perfect and complete antimatter structure. On the other hand, it says that someone who is considered ugly or flawed has a defective one. The quality of your inner structure literally determines the quality of your outer life.
And that really brings us to the ultimate point, the big call to action from this text. The goal of life, especially spiritual practice, isn't to work on the carrier, not the body, not your material stuff.
The real work is on that invisible blueprint. It's about perfecting the antimatter structure itself.
And so we're left with this final thought that gets to the very core of this philosophy. If our entire physical life is just a reflection of an unseen structure, then the real question becomes, what is it that shapes that structure in the first place? And that's the question this text leaves us to think about.